So today I have Sarah Kyder, who is my guest. And Sarah has quite a repertoire and is a composer in music, went to Goucher in Baltimore, went to the Peabody Conservatory after that, went on to study at Yale for her second master's degree. So very talented. Just said Meryl Streep was one of her classmates and colleagues and friends. So has an amazing repertoire again. So happy to have you, Sarah. Thank you for coming over.
She was not in the music program. She was obviously in the drama program.
Right.
But I did lots of stuff there, so I got
Of course,
to,
of course. So you were there with her and enjoyed her company, and you said she was just very nonchalant.
Oh,
and
she was so delightful. I mean, just wonderful.
Oh, so you rubbed elbows with some of the most famous people, huh?
And then I called her to suggest that would she be willing to do the narration on this documentary. And I told people, no, I'm not going to do it. I just can't imagine it's going to work. And anyway, I contacted her email, and she wrote right back and said, sure, if you can wait until January.
Nice.
So it was
wow.
great.
Wow. That's terrific. Yeah. Well, and she has a voice or a presence that's real significant.
Oh, yes, absolutely. She's wonderful.
Where does she live?
Meryl, she's got a home in New York City, but I think she's way up in the corner of Connecticut, Litchfield or something like that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, interesting.
We've not actually been in formal contact since she did narrate the documentary.
Nice, very good. So let's talk about you. Why music? How did you get started in music? Were you... You know, you have Irish descent, and the Irish are big lovers of music. There's just no doubt about that.
Well, sure, that kind of background, but just as a kid, I just loved music. And just intuitively, it mattered to me that more than anything, any other field of interest from early childhood right straight on up. I began piano lessons in first grade. My family had me subscribe to something called Golden Records, which were little yellow.
Oh, I remember the Golden Records, of course.
Right, and they were very tasteful. I remember one that was the music of Stravinsky, and I loved it. It was just great. And so I would listen for hours, and as I said, the records, while suited to children, were very, very tasteful. I was also, I had a really good musical education in high school and elementary school. And
did you grow up down in Baltimore area?
No, I grew up in Albany, New York.
Oh, okay.
Glenmont, which is a suburb a little bit south of it.
Okay, okay.
In any event, at the Albany Academy for Girls, I was there from nursery school right straight through senior year in high school.
That's a long time in one location.
Yeah. And there was a superb choral director.
Nice.
And he conducted the Glee Club. He was a very interesting musician who took interest in, at that time, relatively modern music. We sang music of Bernstein.
Nice, sure.
And, not to name, I mean, that's quite a name. Benjamin Britten. And he took real interest in the Glee Club, took us on trips, to different schools across the border to Massachusetts. He was a very forceful influence.
Nice.
Yeah. And family. The family loved singing. Maybe it's that Irish thing.
Well, my mother would just break into song in the middle of, I don't know, making a cup of tea or stirring, mashing potatoes or something. She would just break into song, and that was just not an uncommon thing in my house all the time. So I
hum when I'm doing chores.
Yes.
I love to hum.
Yes. Yes.
It's the Irish in me.
It is. Lovely.
So we would, the family loved to sing on both sides of the family.
Oh, nice.
And on road trips of whatever size, because we skied a lot, there was always snow up there.
Sure.
And
you have to love it. You just have to take it in as part of your...
Yeah. And my dad was with 10th Mountain Division, so he was, we were brought up on skis. In any event, we would sing rounds generally all the way to wherever we were going.
So you sound like the Von Trapp family, actually. So
Actually,
a little bit of skiing, a little bit of singing, and
yeah, I actually my first real job in between Peabody and Yale School of Music was up in Stowe, Vermont. I was the
Nice.
elementary school teacher.
Oh, really?
Well, just bizarre. I mean, it was so provincial and so teeny.
Oh, yeah, but it's a beautiful area.
It's a gorgeous area. And I skied and skied.
Nice.
And, of course, the Trapp family singers were up there at
Of
the Trapp
course.
family lodge.
And they're still there.
Sure are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that was the text, actually, that Clarence Hollister used, the Trapp family booklet for recorder music. And so I played recorder as well at the Academy for Girls, my school.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so there was a lot going on musically there. And then here I was in Stowe, Vermont with the Trapp family.
That's pretty amazing. That's really rubbing your elbows again with some pretty famous people who've made music their life, some of them at least.
Yeah. So.
That's great. So you think music is important? You think that we should start kids with music at a very early age?
Absolutely. I mean, I started with my golden records and then started piano lessons privately in first grade.
Nice.
As I said, went straight through. And continued piano lessons at Goucher, at Peabody, at Yale, and then took lessons privately thereafter. So I've been studying piano for a very long time.
What about the other end of the spectrum? Do you think it's ever too late to start studying music? I know my brother and his wife have become pianists and do concerts together or performances together. And he's a few years older than me, so he didn't start, and we didn't grow up with a piano in our house, but we did have a musical sensibility to us. What do you think about music as you age?
I don't think it's ever too late to start anything musically, as long as your will is there. And whatever age you might be, it's your will to do it that counts.
I love that.
Yeah.
And to me, it seems like it's good for your brain, just to keep your brain activated and different parts of the brain. Have you seen some of the research on that?
Yes, I have.
Yes.
And that music definitely optimizes the brain. So yes, indeed, I've seen that.
And we need to use those different facets of the brain. The neurons need to be firing, and we need to keep those active as we age.
Absolutely.
So, right.
Yep.
Right. That's
Yep.
good for memory. Yeah, short-term
Yeah.
memory, long-term memory, all of those things.
Yep.
So develop those synapses.
Yeah.
So you talked to me a little bit about tonal and atonal music,
Yeah.
and I wanted you to give a little mini lesson here, if you wouldn't mind. About
Sure. Okay. Atonal music is music that does not have a tonal center. I don't know if anyone can hear anything, but I've got one little line here
Sure.
of a major scale, a minor scale,
Okay.
which are tonal,
Okay.
and then a 12-tone scale by Arnold Schoenberg,
Okay.
who was a proponent of this thing called 12-tone.
12 tone.
And you can certainly hear here's your major scale. Starting on C, ending on C. Here's minor. Here's 12-tone. So you can hear a very striking difference, right?
Yes, definitely.
All right.
So that's a good example.
So the, tonal music would be characterized as the kinds of scales that you just heard, the major and minor scales. In the 20th century, it was mainly Schoenberg and his disciples who test ran a very different kind of music called 12-tone. And it involved all of the pitches, the white and black pitches, in between, say, a C and a C, and there are 12 of them. And the music, it's so terribly different from the scales, which are just based on stepwise motion, as you just heard, major and minor seconds, very hearable. And then you heard the 12-tone sounds, which are very different. They're very angular. They are not stepwise motion. They involve what we call leaps. And so that is the significant difference between tonal music and atonal music.
Okay.
Or 12-tone, freely atonal. That is the difference.
And what do you prefer? Is there a preference that you have?
For me now, after being basically forced to write the 12-tone at both Peabody and at Yale in my first years, I was not ever really hearing that music. And if you don't hear the music that you're writing, you're never going to really write a successful piece or write anything at all. And so for those first years, I was forced to write 12-tone. That's what the teachers were teaching. And so, renegade that I am, I just made a decision that I was paying money for this education and that I was not hearing 12-tone music. I was not hearing atonal music. I was hearing tonal music, which can be modes, and it can be scalar, the scales that you heard. And so I made a formalized decision, both at Peabody, to use tonal music. And it was fine at Peabody. I had a teacher who recognized anything that I wrote and said it was fine. And at Yale, I also had a really wonderful teacher after the first year. His name was Bob Morris, and he could write anything. He could write in any style. And so he was willing to allow his students to write in a style that they heard. And as I said, you can't write what you're not hearing. And so after that rather unsuccessful first year, I had a very successful second year and a really successful third year.
Nice.
And wrote a piece called Homegrown at Yale, which was very simple. It was improvisatory, which means it's got elements that are repeating, or you go back to them. It was an improvisation.
Can you sing a little bit of it?
I really can't.
No. Okay.
It was a piano piece.
Okay.
And after, so many of the composers there were doing 12-tone and freely atonal, and here I was, Sarah Meneely-Kyder, Sarah Meneely at that time, writing shamelessly in tonal idioms. But this piece, Homegrown, to my disbelief and to my joy, after the raised eyebrows, when I started writing the tonal music, Homegrown won the Rena Greenwald Prize for the best written piano piece in 1973.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
That's really, really nice.
And since I don't always just write in the tonal idiom, I go back and forth, use elements of atonal music in what I'm writing. Some people have referred to it as blip-blop music because of those wild intervals. But I sometimes include that in some of my writing. But predominantly, I think that the tonal music, with my stamp on it, and I can't really describe to you what my stamp is, but it doesn't sound like, I don't think it sounds like anyone else's tonal music. I think
we all put our own little, with art, with any kind of,
stamp.
Visual. Yeah. If I was to paint something, people would say, that's Kate Steele.
Yeah.
We just do it. It's just how it is. So
Absolutely.
Same for you.
Yep. So that's what happened. And so I was thrilled to win this prize, and several students at that point made the same choice.
Nice.
And so the school at this point, I think is more than willing to adapt to what the students are willing to write.
Well, people need to be a little bit flexible, I think, especially with the arts, don't you?
Yes.
And if you travel around the world, you see some people have music that is really dissimilar to what we hear, what we think of as traditional music and tonal or atonal. What do you think about that?
Well, I went to Wesleyan. I taught piano, actually, for 22 years, and Wesleyan is noted for its study of music of different cultures.
Yes.
And there were Indian musicians, both South and North Indians, and then it was limited to the South Indian program. But all kinds of music other than our music, the familiar music, was touted. And so I really respected that, and I found that to be one of the really strong suits of being at Wesleyan and teaching there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't really know very much about it, so I don't even know the questions to ask you to bring it out. But I know I've been to concerts where people are kind of bringing that music up, and it just sounds so foreign to my ears. And it's just because of lack of cultural experience, I guess, perhaps more than anything.
Yeah. Well, in 1973, I mean, Indian music has always been extremely interesting to me. And Indian music was touted at Wesleyan, as I said, in both the North Indian and South Indian traditions. And it was the Carnatic or South Indian that stuck. And I studied the Indian Sitar. Actually, that's North Indian. So I developed a very, very strong interest in this particular.
And the sitar is like a hammered dulcimer?
Not really.
No.
No, it's a large, double-gorded instrument.
Okay. String, right?
Right, with 4 main playing strings on the top, reverberating strings on the side, and then a number of underneath strings to add resonance to what you were playing on the top of it. The ones on the side were called shikari, and you just stroke them to create a rhythmic sense. So, yeah, I had that is the music that really appealed to me and continues to. I think it's beautiful music.
It evolves, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So what do you think is beautiful about music, or what? Yeah, what is?
There have been so many beautiful works that I was going to kind of read here that span the century from
Absolutely.
way back when, pre-Bach, Bach, all the way to the avant-garde, which some people might describe as out there. But really, it's a matter of personal choice. I mean, there are some people who think tonal music is beautiful, some people who think 12-tone or atonal music is beautiful. I go either way. I've heard a number of pieces in the 12-tone style that I find stunning. It's more mathematical in the way it's constructed,
right.
And that's not really about me. I'm a very intuitive composer. It takes me longer to write music than I think some composers, because I don't rely on a style that happens to be in vogue out there at any given point. But so I write intuitively until I'm satisfied with the result.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Well, I'm always so amazed, like how the Beatles would just come up with the song at, almost like they would have just like a breath of air, or a window open and a breeze come in, and all of a sudden there's this construction, this composition that they've put together.
An extraordinary music. I mean, just an incredible band, just extraordinary.
It's interesting to look at their history and their evolution, too.
Oh, yeah. Very briefly, I went to England one time with my family, and just long story short, on one street in London, the Queen had a parade that was going on, and in a street relatively close by, the Beatles were parading, or
just hanging out, huh?
And I think there were more people at the Beatle.
Probably. They were very popular.
They
yes.
were they're just an incredible band. They're just great.
Well, I was just hearing yesterday a podcast that I was listening to. It was about Blackbird and the double entendre, the meaning of Blackbird, and how it was basically a civil rights song. And so much of what they wrote had, I think if we pursued...
That undercurrent. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, the double entendre kind of thing that we'd need to kind of explore and understand better.
Yeah.
How do you explain somebody like Beethoven?
How do I explain him?
Yeah, his talent, and wasn't he deaf?
He went deaf.
Became deaf, okay.
He became deaf. Bach became blind, but Beethoven became deaf. But at the point that he became deaf, he's obviously a very, very brilliant composer.
Accomplished composer, so he already knew it and understood it viscerally. So
he heard it inside of him. He heard it from what I would describe as the inner ear.
Yeah, right.
So at the point that this part of his listening ear stopped, the inner ear never stopped listening.
So he had it through bone conduction. He could feel it in his body with the sensation of the sound coming.
Hear it in his soul, in his mind. He could hear it. And some of his greatest pieces were written after his becoming deaf.
Interesting, isn't it? It's just it's very so fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to see colors with music and notes? Are you kind of that talent?
No.
No. My husband gets music lessons and studies the hammer dulcimer, and his teacher has that. So she is able to see the colors of the sounds and the notes that they're playing. So that's really kind of interesting.
When I was at Yale, we did have a composer come to visit, and I can't remember who that composer was, but he did have that color association and played some examples of his music with a kind of a musical backdrop showing what was happening coloristically as the music proceeded.
Well, I think music is so important too, because when you go to a movie or see something on television or even advertisement, all through our lives, wherever we go, and even jingles for buying things, right? The music underlines and underscores the importance of whatever it is, the drama or the fear or the sentiment that might be expressed on the screen.
Yeah. What was striking about Beethoven was that he introduced a very different kind of tradition, which was referred to as Sturm und Drang, storm and stress.
Okay. Yeah, he's very dramatic.
Extremely dramatic.
Yes.
And this was quite different from the music that preceded him. And so he was very famous for the Sturm und Drang dramatic output.
Interesting.
A wonderful composer, just absolutely brilliant.
Nice. So what advice would you give for people who are interested in becoming musicians, exploring their musical sides, their talents?
You need to make sure that you have the basic financial needs.
It's not cheap.
It's not. The education is not cheap, and I think it's the case regarding all of the arts, but it's generally underfunded. And if you choose to be a composer, it's often very underfunded. So you need to make sure that you have basic financial needs, that you have the time, because it requires a lot of time, and for me, solitude. I need to be in a very, very quiet setting. I need to be alone in my studio. But it requires financial means. It requires plenty of time, span of time, to let the creative juices really begin to flow and get things written down. I think of all of the fields, composition requires the greatest length of time to manage, to create.
And how do you create that for yourself? Do you go down by the water or find how do you do that for yourself? Is it through a cup of tea? And
no, it's just in my mind. And I have often some of the best inspirations for me have been in the midnight to 3 a.m. hours. So, and they're very fertile hours for me as a composer. And I'll hear something bumping around in my head, and I'll just put on my heavy bathrobe and a parka and head out to the studio at 1 or 2 or 3 and get it down on the piano, manuscript, just scribbled in pencil and so forth, and so that it doesn't die away before I can get it down, eviscerate, whatever the word is. And then the next day, I go out and I get it on the computer so that it doesn't look like scribble on the piano.
That's really fascinating, the whole process of creativity, and sometimes it does come to you in the wee hours.
It does. I think 2 o'clock is, I've understood that it's an extremely fertile hour, and for me it sure was.
And still continues to be, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And you're still writing, still composing. Are you still teaching as well?
No, I stopped teaching at Wesleyan after those 22 years. In 2013, maintained a small private studio at home, mainly teaching piano, but a couple of composition lessons, but piano was what I was teaching primarily.
Nice.
And as I think I said, piano is what I was teaching at Wesleyan as well. And so I maintained the studio for a bit, but then stopped. I'd had many, many years of teaching, 22 at Wesleyan.
Well, you said you did it up in Vermont, too, and that was a long time ago. When
Way long ago. And then teaching at the Ethel Walker School up in Simsbury, Connecticut. Lots of teaching experience, and after all of those years, and it was 8 years at Ethel Walker, it was 22 at Wesleyan, I finally tired.
I'm sure. Well, you've given a lot, and it was beautiful having you on as a guest today. Loved what you had to say about your life experience, Sarah. Sarah Kyder, you're a lovely guest. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, and we all feel a little bit smarter knowing about tonal and atonal music and how we can build it better. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me to do this. I'm very grateful.
Thank you.
Okay.